The world is so broken, and maybe that's the best time to put it back together.
I just got out of grad school, have to find some income. So I took the first job that came my way, which was doing some fundraising for the university I went to.
So I have to ask who your favorite American president is or was and why.
I think was a very effective president. Very complicated guy, though.
Welcome to Keep Hustling. Welcome to Keep Hustling, where we are going past the why to get to the how. I'm your host, the always hustling Aaron Gordon, aka NY Risk Advisor, aka Mr. #Keep Hustling. And in this podcast, we will be diving deep into the professional and personal successes of our guests to find out how they hustled through the most difficult times in their life and their development to achieve the success they've gotten to today. So buckle up for what hopes to be an amazing ride. And of course, now and always, keep hustling. Welcome to Keep Hustling with my guest, Matt Krayton. Matt, thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
I am a little disappointed because I was going to lead with a New Jersey joke and some sort of like New York, New Jersey thing, but then you told me right before we went live that you actually live in my second favorite state in the United States, and that's Delaware. So shout out to Delaware. There's nothing quite like the joy of my first ever business trip that I went on with my father. He should rest in peace. And we pull up. He was always getting to places early. He says, "Hey, we should stop." On the way to our meeting at this strip mall, there was a Golf Galaxy. That's where I got my couple new clubs. It was like a big day for us. And then I noticed that there was no sales tax, and I got super excited. And it was like, oh, this is really the land of the free and the home of the Braves. This is unbelievable. I just saved 8%. Bam. So I got my driver and my 3-wood there. So it's among other reasons, it holds a very special place in my heart.
I'll tell you, it is a thrill as a New Jersey native to walk into a store, particularly when we're talking about golf. To say that I'm an avid golfer would be incorrect, but I do enjoy golf from time to time, and it is a thrill to purchase a set of clubs or a driver, 3-wood, whatever you're doing, and not see that sales tax in there. So huge perk of having moved down to
what's
Delaware.
on the tag is actually the thing. It's unbelievable. It's like,
I know you're not doing the mental calculation.
It's a crazy world you live in.
Yeah,
it's a crazy world we live in. But
I love it.
I was, as I mentioned before, I'm really excited to have you here for a couple of reasons. But I want to, your career has spanned, I'm going to get to what you're doing now, but in the last 14, 15 years, two main specialties, what I'll call specialties, are politics and education, or educating students or people on politics, or politics and educating. I don't know which one you would consider your first love and your second love, but I'm fascinated to know how that happened. Obviously, I think that what I have found is of the most passionate people about what they're doing, educators really have to feel that, especially today. But then being in education and deciding to advise politicians in a crazy world doesn't seem like something that the average educator would say, this is like really what I need in my life, or vice versa. So I would love to know about how you got there and the evolution, and we'll start there.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So if we were talking in 2006 and you asked me what I wanted to do with my life, I would have told you I am dead set on becoming a teacher. I'm not really sure why I came to that hope for a career path, but I think some of it was, I was not the best student in high school, and I had some teachers throughout high school who really made a huge difference in my life, despite my shortcomings and sort of refusal to do homework and kind of that sort of thing, and all of the attendant issues that come along with ADHD and fun stuff like that. So
nobody has ADHD. It's made up. Totally made up.
It's totally fake.
Totally fake. Fake news.
Yeah, that's what I told them. They didn't buy it though, and I did not get late credit on stuff. So that's how we ended up. But yeah, I mean, I had some teachers that made a big difference in my life. So I thought, this is really interesting. I always liked history, in particular, the social studies end of things, so economics and political science. So that's what I went to school for. I went to school for history, history undergrad with a political science minor, with an eye toward becoming a teacher. Ended up getting my master's degree in education, did the whole student teaching thing. And then what happened after that was sort of what I like to call a very quintessentially millennial story. So, somewhere in there, 2008 happened, right? Financial meltdown. And in New Jersey, where I was planning on becoming a teacher, there were tons of budget cuts in for schools and school districts. So there weren't that many jobs. So a bunch of jobs got cut. So I came out of grad school having applied to hundreds of teaching jobs. Meanwhile, as I was going through the student teaching process, I really actually loved the act of teaching. So getting up in front of the room, talking about interesting topics, watching the sort of light bulbs go off in the eyes of the students, right, as they're sitting there thinking about different issues or thinking critically about history in particular. I thought that was a lot of fun. What I didn't find so fun, and this is not going to surprise you given that I wasn't great in high school, was all the paperwork and the standards and all that stuff. So in the back of my mind at that point, I was a little like, I'm not sure I really want to be doing this at this point. Like, I like some of it, don't get me wrong, but doing this full time, if I have to really climb this steep of a mountain to even find a job to begin with, maybe I'll just start looking elsewhere and we'll see what happens. So that's what happened. Was I was like, all right, you know what, I just got out of grad school, have to find some income. So I took the first job that came my way, which was doing some fundraising for the university I went to,
Oh God.
which that sucked, right? So that was
I have a brother that basically does that for a living. It's oh God.
it's brutal. So what they ended up doing is they hired two of us, right? Myself and a guy from the other. So my school had two campuses, and they hired both of us. And our job was to connect with young alumni. So as you can imagine, in the aftermath of the
Huge
2008 financial
pockets,
crisis,
huge, deep,
deep
easy.
pockets, yeah, no student loans to
Yeah,
speak
sure.
of, right? Yeah. So a lot of disposable income. And so we sat in this closet of an office making phone calls all day, basically being told to do all sorts of creative things to ourselves in response. Jump out windows, and you get the point. People were very creative, so I handed to them, and I cannot blame them for exercising some of that creativity. But um, so then, predictably, it didn't work out because we raised no money because nobody wanted to give money, and all this stuff that we were. So they basically were like, "You're laid off after 10 months." The board of trustees had enough. They're like, "This isn't working. You're laid off." I'm like, "Oh, damn! I don't want to do that again." So I had this crazy idea that I enjoyed politics. I thought it was interesting. In grad school, I had been a graduate assistant, so I'd worked at a public opinion polling institute called the Public Mind Poll, where they measure attitudes about different policies or public figures, government figures, and I really like that. I really like trying to figure out what makes people tick, what contributes to their political opinions, beliefs, political behavior. So like, oh, this is interesting. Let me just become a political consultant, which is insane. Now that I say that out loud and tell the story late, 14 years later, it sounds absolutely insane. But
If fundraising doesn't work, I'll just become a political consultant.
I'll
Sure.
just like go ahead and do this thing. So
It's either
so
that or
I
becoming a doctor. So
I know. Well, yeah, exactly. I'll just be a doctor. We'll practice out of a dark alley or something. And so that's kind of what it felt like, though. It's like I had no experience other than the academic experience to speak of in that space. And but I was just like, you know what? I think it was youthful delusion probably. And I just kind of let it rip. So I was able to find one or two clients, which kind of brought me to that point, which I was lucky, and we ended up winning one of the races, which was unexpected. But the real trick was, I was like, what would they trust me to do? Seeing as I have no experience, but I am young, and social media is just starting to become a thing in campaigns. So I'm like, I'll do your social media. So I found a couple campaigns that were willing to take a chance on me. And they're like, "Oh yeah, you are young. You must know how to use Facebook." I'm like, "Yeah, I do. I sure
you
sure
should see my
do."
SEO skills. I'm legend. Before
Exactly.
ChatGPT, by the way.
Total legend. Yeah. So yeah, I got hired to do those campaigns, and I kind of met people, kept networking, and it snowballed into a real business where, we've done a lot of work in politics from the local level on down to, or on up to the presidential level in 2020, and in everything in between. And then have done a lot of work in the corporate space, crisis management, public affairs, so public policy type stuff. So it's been a varied an interesting 14 years, not without its challenges, but it's been interesting. So that's sort of how I arrived at politics. To answer your question, was it was part passion and interest, part youthful insanity, delusion, and somehow made it work. So, and here we are today.
I love that youthful ignorance. I miss that. There's a lot to unpack there. I just want to, there's one very important thing that I want to point out that you said, which I think is so true. I too was not a great student. I was not the favorite of educators, but I think it's, and I've spoken to my friends about this and my siblings. My wife was an incredible student, yet the teachers that had and the educators that had the greatest impact on me had a greater impact on me personally than on the ones on her. Meaning,
Mhm.
I think that when you're a great student, and this is not knocking that, I think everyone should be a good student. I think that if you're going to be in school, and especially if you're going to pay for it or someone else is going to pay for it for you, you should be in that 110%. So I'm not advocating for people not taking their education seriously. But when you're so focused on the book,
Mm.
the individual has less of an opportunity to impact you. And I've mentioned some of the educators that had a great impact on me before. I had a fifth grade teacher who, to this day, Ms. Ginsburg. She was amazing. My friends who listen to this podcast know, I've quoted her character when no one's looking very, very often. I had a teacher in 10th grade that failed me in
Mhm.
English literature, and I voluntarily took him again in 12th grade,
Mhm.
just
Yeah.
so that I could pass with
Mhm.
him, and show him Dr. Gaylord, and I've actually run into him on the subway, and hopefully he's listening. Dr. Gaylord, you're the man. I remember it. Heart of Darkness, we got a lot there, but I just think that especially now when education gets such a difficult rap and everyone's questioning it, and I'm not here to talk about the validity of that, but I think that if people just allow those who are willing to give of themselves to impact them, whether it's with information or with life lessons or just with plain old random inspiration, I feel like the world would be a better place. And I think that that's really what we need to get off my soapbox. But I think that education is super important there. And it's just funny how I feel the same way you do about education.
Mhm.
I'm not crazy enough to think that I should go back into it, because that definitely wouldn't happen. But just the impact, and if you think about that, then you think about the impact that you can have on other people.
Mhm.
Like you said, the people who had an impact on you, you actually didn't want them to impact.
Mhm.
You
Yeah.
you hated being in their classroom, for
Yeah.
lack of a better term, right? So I think that that's pretty amazing. I there's a lot that I want to ask you, and I don't want to get too personally political, but my
Mhm.
father, he should rest in peace, would not be happy if I didn't ask you this question.
Sure.
But this is not. We're gonna go another place with this podcast. But I was just thinking, he was a political science major, history minor.
Mm.
So I have to ask who your favorite American president is or was, and why.
Oh, man, that's a tough one. So I feel like everyone picks the same couple. So you get the Abraham Lincolns, the FDRs, or whatever. I think those are pretty good. It's interesting actually thinking about presidents. Just to kind of go on a little aside, but just thinking about presidents, and I think there's this sense that we try to rewrite history so that the people that we believe are the best are these sort of sterling individuals, right? Like spotless records. They're not complicated people, and they're just these sort of like heroes in American history. And the reality is, none of them are, right. Like I think well, all of us are complicated, right? All of us are complicated. We have flaws, we have baggage, we have things that drive us, things that hold us back, and so it's really interesting to kind of hold a lot of different things in your head at once when thinking about that. So I really actually like LBJ. I think was a very effective president. Very complicated guy though. I think not someone that I would want to be friends with or even get a beer with. I mean, there was a whole story about how he used to invite people over to his ranch in Texas, and he would get hammered, right? So he had these dinner parties, he would get hammered, and then he had this convertible that he would jump in. So he did get everyone in the convertible, and then they would start driving around the ranch, and then he would drive full speed at this lake on the ranch. As it turns out, it was like an amphibious car, so it could actually float. It was a boat, but it would freak everyone out, and it was he would scare people like that. So kind of a maniac, right? And if you hear other stories about how he treated people, kind of a bad guy. Not someone that you'd want to deal with on a daily basis. However, very effective at marshaling some of the most consequential pieces of legislation through are through Congress and into law. So got to hand it to him. I would also say this is going to be nuts, and this might get me in some trouble, but and might make people roll their eyes a little bit. But I really do think Joe Biden was a very effective president too. Interestingly enough, and I know that's sort of like very recently. You expect people to look way back in history and be like, "Oh, I love that George Washington or Lincoln or Jefferson or one of those guys." But I I think he was genuinely a good president, and 20 years, God willing, from now, 50 years from now, God willing, we look back. I think we're gonna look at his term and be like, that was, they did some incredibly consequential stuff. I mean, was it spotless? No, of course not. Were there problems? Of course, but all in all, I think the things that at least they strove to accomplish and did a good job in executing. I think we'll look back and say, hey, those were pretty good things for our country. I kind of wish we had continued those things. I mean, hopefully they do at some point, but so those
I,
are my two answers, which
w-
might sound crazy.
so first of all, I think there's so much there, and there's so much about just inspiring people in general in their hustle, and I think that politics obviously has a large place in that. The first thing is, I'm not going to rip on the Joe Biden thing. We might disagree politically, but what I will say is that I think that, as you said, and modern media has us in a way that we're able to see things that people weren't able to see in the past, but everybody's flawed.
Mhm.
Like everybody is flawed. And yet, when we look at it's almost like looking at deceased older relatives, like
Mm,
nobody really sees the negative. And I think also that time has a way of showing that. There are people who did objectively bad things, and there are people who, and to be in politics, I don't, I couldn't be there in that type of a position. But I think that it's just super interesting because like it will be different 50 or 100 years from now. It will be different, and it's almost like I at some point sometimes I wish, and this was where it wasn't where I was going with the podcast, but I think it's very important for people just to understand when you look at the laser focus of now and when the impact that people can have on the world. Most people who listen to this podcast have no idea. I didn't until you mentioned it, and I'm going to look it up later, like about LBJ, right? And like you just look at that, and that's fine, and it's cool, and it's like I'm sure that if you there's been books written about the bad things about every single president from Washington, literally until Trump. Trump sometimes makes it easy, but like right to the but yet
mhm,
who knows 200 years from now, right? How history will look at any of these people, and history has a way of sometimes, especially in these very public displays, of kind of just focusing on the positive
mhm.
in the long term. Some of it, I think, well, you don't know what information we're going to have, but I love that. I think that people should think about that in their own lives. In that, every once in a while, we think that the negative things or the mistakes we make are going to be the most impactful things, and often those are easier to overcome when there are super positive things and small impacts that we can have on our families and our communities,
Mhm.
which will ultimately be more impactful than the negative.
Oh, 100%. It's really interesting that you brought up, deceased relatives or friends or people that you were close to. Is I've actually talked about this extensively with friends of mine. Having gone through some losses, in the past, couple years. It is really an interesting process to see the transition from when a person was alive and the challenges, the good times, sure, but the challenges that a lot of people had with them, and then all of a sudden starting to revise history a little bit. So it feels like it's hard to say, like, they were, again, we're all complicated, complex people. I don't think you can point to, I mean, there are people, like, genuinely good people, but good people are complex too. Not everyone's perfect. No one's
No
perfect.
one's perfect.
No
Yeah.
one's perfect. Yeah. So I think that's one of the interesting things. You start to see, you look back and then you start to revise out some of those challenges that you had with that person, rather than being able to hold two things in your head at once, which is like, I had my problems here. We also had some really good times together. Like, they were a complex, full human being, as opposed to saying like, oh, this person was unequivocally good and perfect, and then it starts to kind of impact the way in which you conduct yourself in your own life, I think, in a way, like if you're not kind of realistic about those things, it impacts your own ability to self-reflect, or the relationships that you have with people today when they're alive, where it's a fascinating thing. And I think we do that a lot with history, is we look for the things that we most feel will confirm our viewpoint of a particular thing, right? Like that, they did X, like one
But I
thing.
just, yeah, 100%. But I also think, first of all, I love that. And I think that that's what makes us have positive memories. And I want to be clear. Like, if there's listeners out there that have had probably very bad interactions with people in their life and they should delete them and they should be looked at as evil. I'm not saying that. But like, one of the things I'm excited to see is in our lifetime and in my recent lifetime, my adulthood, like there have been polarizing presidents.
Mhm.
Like the last two presidents, super polarizing on both
Sure.
sides. Yet I would love to hear, God willing, my grandchildren one day, when they read about, the politics of this time, something tells me that that what they're learning about in their American history class is going to sound vastly different than what we're hearing right now. The way that the history books are written and the way they view those things. Like I find it fascinating. I think about even just like in my lifetime, how the presidents have become. But anyway, I don't want to dwell too much on presidential politics, but I find it fascinating.
Yeah.
I have to ask you one very, very important question.
Sure.
Education,
Mhm.
politics, and now focusing on leadership and
Mhm.
building the next generation of leaders, or trying to help form that and those people. Why? And I think I know why, so I want to just focus
Mhm.
on more how. Like how the world is so broken.
Mhm.
And maybe that's the best time to put it back together. But like that's crazier than going into than social media and politics in 2007 or 8.
Mhm.
But I love it and we need it. So
Yeah.
why and what and how and
Yeah, I think the answer to that, I mean, there's a lot there. So I think that the first piece is, and it kind of does go back to, we're all complicated, complex human beings, and I think as a public, we have developed this picture of leadership that caters to soothing our inability to sit in uncertainty and discomfort as a society, right? So we look to people who are compelling, charismatic, who can deliver the speech, who can tell you, I alone am going to fix this for you. It's a very compelling thing. And you look at studies, right? We've done a lot of polling and focus groups in our political work, where in times of uncertainty, right? If you have like if you're in a recession or a time of war or some other type of conflict, that you look to leaders who are perceived to be strong and exhibit those traits of a strong leader. The problem is that those traits do not always translate. In fact, I would say rarely translate to people who can engage in the substance of leadership. When it comes to bringing people along and marshaling people along toward a shared purpose, I think it's great to open the door with the soaring rhetoric and the charisma and all of those things. And I think we have this picture of leadership that isn't compatible with, okay, when the rubber meets the road, how do we actually get these things done? How do we motivate teams? How do we uh, make sure that our teams are valued in those ways? So I think we've seen that delta over our work, working in politics. So we've worked with a lot of different leaders and a lot of well-intentioned people, great people, talented people, people who have great ideas on policy, who have done objectively great things in office. The interesting thing is, like, we've been brought in historically before my partner Molly and I started M2 Aspire, which is our leadership development venture. Is we were brought in primarily to work with people on like what to say, like in any given situation, right? So creating advertising that advertises a candidate or a brand or an executive, figuring out what they should say in an interview, or channeling what they're already thinking into a compelling message. The problem is a lot of them aren't in the right mindset to even deliver that, right? Like, so you miss the foundational work. It's like building a house, right? It's almost like trying to frame out a house where you never even poured the concrete.
yeah, but do you believe that that can actually be taught? Meaning, the reason why I say that is like, I'm just going to go back to presidents because I don't know why. I guess I'm just driven talking about this. But like, I'm from New York. We discussed
Mhm.
this. No, we're gonna put my ripping on New Jersey aside. I grew
Sure.
up in Manhattan.
Mhm.
I remember, I remember, I remember 9/11. I remember it. There's no, I can tell you minute by minute, second by second, exactly how it went.
Mhm.
And yet, like the person who the average astute, quote unquote, educated American before that
Mhm.
said made up words and didn't know how to speak, who was the president of the United States at the time, George
Mhm.
W. Bush. And I remember listening to my father saying, like, that wasn't a word when he used to like
Mhm.
speak to the press.
Sure.
Say what you want politically or whether the war should happen or what, led the nation, brought the nation together. You see it with sports, you see it with sports figures. Like the least likely person brings the team together. The coaches are often the best coaches were often like the subpar athletes who were just able to figure out how to inspire others and do all of those things. When there's a tragedy, it's that kid who you least expect it to that brings everyone together.
Mhm.
And so is it that stuff can never be taught? So we try to teach the average business owner how to be a better than average leader, but knowing that there's no way to predict what's going to happen in that moment of crisis.
Mhm.
Or like I'm just thinking about like
Yep.
crazy things. Like when I was in high school, there was a kid who had a I don't know why this just came to my mind, but this kid who had a major heart issue,
Mhm.
and they called. I'm not making any negative comments about the person I'm about to rip on, but they called the school nurse down, and the kid was basically dead on the floor, and they were like telling her to get the AED machine. She had all the training in the world, and she just froze. And I vividly remember the gym teacher saying, like, get out, call the kid over and save the, AED and save this kid's life.
Mhm.
She was trained, he wasn't.
Mhm.
He jumped into the fire, she froze. That's
Mhm.
not a knock on her in any way, because you can't, right? You can't put someone in that situation because you'd have to have a dying person in front of them. So how do you get to that versus what you can train for, what you can prepare for?
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, again, I think there's a lot there. So I think one of the things that we're looking at is there are some folks who are really good at the nuts and but like the actual content of leadership. So the guy who runs and gets the AED and and saves the kid's life, right? Like that is someone who I think nuts and bolts, really good with leadership. Not, but maybe is not the most compelling speaker, for example, or most compelling or charismatic person, but just a guy who was ready in that split second to go jump into action. Same thing with, George W. Bush during 9/11, or Rudy Giuliani, if you want to, take a look at him. Is
God, I
that
love that guy.
he's definitely an interesting character.
Yeah.
So I think
Again,
we have
I just want to say, like,
okay.
that's a great example we were talking about before. Like,
Yeah.
delete the last 10 years,
Hmm.
the guy people would have named their kid Rudy
Yeah.
after
Yeah.
him. It's like it's just, but I don't want to get into that. But it's just that's an amazing statement about what ends up happening to people. But
I think it is. So
why
I
I
think.
never go into politics, by the
Oh yeah, for
way.
sure. Yeah. I mean, I think we have a hard time, and so credit where credit is due, right? Like I think in those moments, there are people who approach it with the best intentions they have access to, right? So George W. Bush, for example, I think may not agree with. I mean, Grant, like I certainly did not agree with much of his policy on anything. I mean, again, in retrospect is hindsight is 2020. So you look back and he's looking pretty good, I think, in terms of Republican politics at this point. But I think he personally approached things from a sense of compassion, not always eloquently, but compassion and a love for the country. Like I think that was forefront in his mind. I love America. I love this country that I've been chosen to lead, and I, albeit imperfectly, take that responsibility seriously. Now, how we move forward and do that, completely different question. So I do think intent, right? Intending to do the right thing is incredibly important. Starting there. The problem is, like, if you look at the rest of his term after that, things turned into a bit of a disaster, right? Like, I think looking back, you could look back at the Iraq War, and this is really not like much of a partisan position because you could look at ask a lot of Republicans today who are very anti-war because of this. Is it just wasn't necessary to do that.
Right. So I want to drill down on exactly that because it's almost like and this is really where I want to focus on leadership in the last few minutes we have, is that in the moment of rising to that unpredictable leadership moment,
Mhm,
right? That the house is on fire and we need someone to jump into action. It was almost like perfect.
mhm,
But yet then when the person who is so good at that has to think about the leadership moment
mhm,
and tries to like actually plan it, sometimes it goes awry. Whereas sometimes the people that are the best at planning the leadership moments can't deal with the unpredictable ones.
mhm.
So I guess my question to you is, as a person who's training the next generation of leaders or trying to inspire the next generation, which one do you focus on and how do you do that? Knowing that usually the personalities that are good at the planned aren't great at the chaos, and the ones that are good at the chaos aren't good at the plan. So
So I do think you could actually teach it. It's just a matter of willingness coming to the table, right? So if you have a leader who's good at one thing or the other, and they at least have some sense of their blind spots as a leader, I think that is an incredibly powerful thing, and you can coach through that. In fact, we have coached through that, right? We've worked with plenty of people in the political sphere who struggled to maybe even do some of the nuts and bolts of leadership, and vice versa. People who are really good at the policy and the nuts and bolts and the understanding the moving pieces, and they have offices, like staff in their offices, who are very very happy with their boss, but their boss just publicly can't deliver the message. Maybe there's a little bit of a lack of charisma, or they just haven't found their voice yet, right? So I think in both scenarios, both of those things are coachable as long as you want to be coached, right? So like I'm not under any illusion that we can walk into a room with someone who fundamentally is resistant to the whole thing. They don't want to be coached. You think you know everything. Those are not people that I think we can help. They're going to be out there no matter what, and some of them may get into leadership positions, but I think the more that we talk about the traits that make good leaders, both from the public facing piece of it, right? So being able to compel people and to have these sort of authentic messages that resonate with folks, that's important. But then also being able to do the nuts and bolts of leadership, not getting bored of the part where you actually have to do the work and implement the policy or implement the new culture in a workplace or deal with staff issues or whatever it is you're dealing with in a business context. Um, those people are going to get into positions of power, but I think the more that we talk about the good things, the traits that make really good leaders on both of those sides of those equations, and actually reassessing our entire perception of what leadership means. Because again, I think if you and we've seen this again in our polling and some of the focus groups that we do where we talk to folks, it's like you look for strength, you look for charisma. That's what people think about leaders. And I think the more that we can disabuse and have a conversation of yes, but then there's the next step, which is actually doing the thing, right? And doing it in a way where you have integrity, clarity, and are true to values. I think that is what we need to do as people who have platforms or have the ability to talk about these things. Like I say, I think the more we talk about it, it just gets people thinking, oh yeah, maybe there is something missing, right? Maybe leadership it aren't the guys that you see on social media, right? Like you see this, the influencers running these seminars, and no offense to them, they've been pretty successful in selling that part of it. But at the end of the day, like a lot of times you hear it's like, well, it's pretty hollow though. Like once you talk to some of the people that have done the seminars or staff, it's like there are issues there. So it's I think we get this idea like we conflate leadership and success, leadership and platform, leadership and loudest voice, and that's not it, right? Leadership is, again, in my view, the ability to lead people with a common purpose, with a clear voice, authentically, and in a way that is true to values, true to your stated values. And I think if you can do that, that makes you a great leader. And everyone's going to do that in a slightly different way too. I mean, again, you can't make someone who's not naturally like and doesn't have comedic timing, like you cannot turn that person into a stand-up comic probably, but you can help them speak in an authentic voice that works for them, that
where they don't
resonates
need
with
the comedy because they're leaning into their strength.
exactly. So I think there are ways to do it. It's just I think it's just in terms of like what we can do and like people like us can do is just like just talk about this and say like, look, I think there's more to leadership than we think in the public eye. I mean, I cannot tell you how many conversations I've had in the last year with people who have, pardon the expression, like really shitty bosses, right? Like, I mean, and you could like poll your friends, I'm sure, and colleagues, and just be like, hey, like, have you had a shitty boss before? And people will vividly be able to tell you a vivid story about a time that someone just completely ruined their day and stifled progress in an organization because they fundamentally were not invested in their own leadership skills. And so, you hear about that over and over and over again. And the people I'm talking to, this is really fascinating. My partner Molly says this all the time, is like those people have the leadership qualities. The ones that are talking about this, they're just afraid to do it. They're afraid to step up. They're
Right.
the buried treasure. This is her terminology. Molly McGarrick, shout out, buried treasure in these organizations.
And by the way,
Like,
if the leader would inspire them, it would be better for the leader also.
yes.
That's the irony. The irony about good leadership is that the best leaders end up being able to work less, do less, make more money, do all those things. Not that they want to work less, but my point is the 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 ship can be steered without them while they're, resting, as
It is.
opposed to that might, and yet it's those people who often stifle the others around them, and therefore, so maybe the answer is that what we really need to do for the next generation is inspire people to speak up, even if they feel like, or contribute, even if they feel like that's not what the boss wants, because they'll learn two things: one, this is really not a place I should be long term,
Mhm.
or the boss just didn't know how to express, or the leader didn't know how to express that they needed that input or wanted that input or saw value in that input because they were too caught up in trying to make payroll or whatever.
Mhm. Yeah, oh yeah, 100%. I think I mean, if I could leave people with one really important skill, it's the skill of having really difficult conversations. We actually just did a presentation at a conference for senior level public affairs and government affairs professionals. And these are folks who have 10, 15, 20 years of experience under their belt. Not new kid, not the new kid on the block, not just coming out of college or an intern. These are seasoned professionals who have had quite a bit of success in their careers. And the level of interest in better figuring out how to have difficult conversations was through the roof. I mean, the people were really interested in this. It's like, oh yeah, and then all of a sudden you hear all of these different scenarios that they're throwing out in the Q&A. It's like, well, I have this problem at work. I have this problem at work. How can I have this conversation? Developing that ability to again have those uncomfortable, difficult conversations, I think is really important because. And then one thing that we left them with in that is a lot of this is just about surfacing the thing that's sitting below the surface, right? Like if you can get that undercurrent and push it all the way up to the surface so you really know what the thing is, the actual thing, not the stated reasons or the boxes you have to check or the infinite layers of process you can throw on top of stuff. It's what is the emotional undercurrent of whatever's happening. Let's get that to the surface. Let's deal with that because you're not going to be able to move anything else forward. Again, it's like thinking about rip currents, right? And when you're surfing or something, it's like you don't see it below the water. Everything looks fine, and then you get in, you get sucked out, and you're like, wait a second, I thought I was just like jumping in calm ocean here. And
I love
suddenly
that.
you're getting sucked out to sea. It's because there's something going on underneath. And wouldn't it have been nice to see that to begin with?
I love that.
So
We're probably gonna have to do another episode because we're over time, but I have so much to talk to you about. But I appreciate you being here. I appreciate the honesty, and
thank you.
I think that everyone needs to realize we need to inspire the next generation to have the difficult conversations and to realize that even if the person who you're having the conversation with reacts negatively, you're still better off
100%.
because hiding from the reality or forcing the reality below the surface and just stepping on it, eventually it's going to rear its head. And I think that if we can build strong leaders who are receptive, but also the next generation of leaders who experience that and don't want to be a bad boss. Like I don't want to be a bad boss. I would never. We're starting we're working with a consultant to kind of just do a little bit of analysis on our business. And the scariest part of the whole thing is that they're going to anonymously and confidentially interview the entire staff.
Mhm.
And it would destroy me
Mhm.
if I found out that people were too afraid to express their opinion. It wouldn't shock me because I think that there's inherently that, I don't want to call it
Sure.
power struggle, but there's that.
Mhm.
But I would just, if I would say, please just, I will do my best not to get offended. I'm from New York. I got thick skin. Like, let's do
Mhm.
it. So I love that. And I really, really appreciate the insight and everything that you're doing for the world at large and the great state with no sales tax of Delaware. So really appreciate it.
God bless him.
Matt, as you know, we have a closing tradition on this podcast where we ask our guests to leave us with their favorite motivational or inspirational quote and what it means to them and to their hustle. So with that, I'm going to say again, Matt Krayton, thank you for being here. Everyone should follow you, follow your work. be inspired by you. And the floor is yours.
Thank you for having me. So this one's interesting. I think it's attributed a lot to Walt Whitman, but I don't think he ever said this. So it's more or less curiosity, not judgment. Which got a little bit of airtime in Ted Lasso. So maybe I'll attribute it to Ted Lasso, which has a lot of motivational stuff, and it actually worth a watch, honestly, as far as if you're looking for leadership traits. There's a lot of good stuff in that show, but curiosity, not judgment. And I think that is a superpower when you are judging a situation or judging yourself or your own feelings or behaviors. It's not very productive. I think if you approach things with curiosity, you open your mind to finding a different path forward on things in a way which you don't get through straight judgment. So it's like, oh, this situation is good or bad, or I really don't like this coworker. This problem is intractable. Well, that's judgment. Curiosity is why. Why do we seem stuck here? Why do I feel this way in this situation? I'm not judging myself. Like, it's okay to feel how I feel. I'm just curious. Let's dig into that a little bit. I think that's a superpower. If you're curious, it'll take you really far because and it also helps you take feedback and give feedback much better. So to your point about getting the results of an anonymous survey back, that is terrifying. And you're approaching it with the right mindset of like, I'm curious about what people have to say, right? Thick skin, curious about what have to people say, not like, oh my God, I can't believe, so and so, or, somebody said that I talk too much in meetings or something like that. You know what I mean? It's so, being curious about that actually is helpful. And you may come to the conclusion that whatever feedback you got was not necessarily on point, but it's worth going through the exercise. So that's my thing. Curiosity, not judgment.
I love that. This has been another episode of Keep Hustling. Remember, do well by doing good. And like Matt said, stay curious. And of course, and always, keep hustling. All right, hustlers, that brings us to the end of another fantastic episode. Thank you for listening. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast so you never miss an episode. If you have any suggestions, comments, or even just want to say hello, please feel free to reach out to us on all social media platforms. We are Keep Hustling Pod. Until next time, stay curious, stay hungry, and keep hustling.